Live from the mist-enshrouded mountaintop fortress that is X and Y Communications headquarters, you're listening to the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. And now, here's your host, Scott McKay.
All right, gentlemen, welcome yet again to another episode of the world-famous Mountaintop Podcast. My name is Scott McKay, at Scott McKay on both Twitter and Clubhouse, Real Scott McKay on Instagram. You can find all of our YouTube videos, including visual representations of this show, by searching Scott McKay on YouTube. That's SCOTMCKAY. The website is mountaintoppodcast.com. And as always, I invite you to join a like-minded group of men who are looking to get great women into their lives at the Facebook group called the Mountaintop Summit. With me today is a returning guest. I've known this guy for well over a decade now. He's always thinking about really interesting and, frankly, intelligent thoughts. He's a bit of an intellectual. And you guys absolutely loved his last show, so much so that I brought him back on to talk about another topic that sounds incredibly interesting to me, and I know he's passionate about. His name is Michael Lassen. He's Danish originally, living in Cyprus now. And today we're going to talk about life's golden checklist. Michael, welcome back, man.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's a pleasure, and thank you for the last time and putting it on your top 20 list. That was amazing.
Yeah, well, you know what I did? I took a little group of the podcast, the episodes that were getting really super results that guys were really resonating with, particularly so. And I made a playlist of those top hits, I guess, and certainly your show was on it. And for good reason. I mean, we had a great conversation, and I'm looking forward to this one. And I want to kick it off by asking you, Michael, what inspired you to put something together at all called Life's Golden Checklist, man?
Well, I've always been a fan of Warren Buffett and his level of thinking. And, obviously throughout the last many decades, he's been on and off as the most wealthy person in the world. And not that wealth is everything, but it's certainly one thing that's easy to quantify and to measure. And so it started even very early on when I bought a book about gambling because I wanted to beat my friends in poker when I was a teenager, and I got fascinated about the level of thinking that he was doing. And what I noticed was that he credited pretty much all of his success to the checklist that he developed throughout the years of how to invest. And you can actually Google that. It's at least a big part of the checklist is something that he has revealed. There's a couple of extra points that he hasn't talked about. But that was really the gist of it as I realized that, if the most wealthy person in the world consistently in the last 50 years credits all his success to a checklist, I'm like, I'm not smarter than him. So it made sense for me to go deeper into the concept of checklist and how to utilize it. And what also fascinated me about checklist was that every time somebody uses a checklist and measures the result, it always comes out positive. Like there's never been any research or experiments where people have implemented a checklist and where they've gotten worse results. And as I think we talked about before as well, is that so much of success is the consistency of small victories. And so all of that made me realize, I need to dig deeper into what checklists can do for me. And like you said, I'm an intellectual with a tendency of overthinking, and when I use that to my advantage, some pretty cool things come through as a result. And then I got the idea that this was the first name I had at Life's Golden Checklist, is that, well, if you make a checklist that can make you as successful as Warren Buffett in business, what would a life checklist look like? And that was the question that led me on a now almost 3-year journey.
So basically, you took what Warren Buffett put together and kind of transmuted that to life in general, not just investing.
Yeah, and what was funny was that it was really sort of a Homer Simpson moment when I realized that back before we met 10, 11 years ago, is that I had developed this sort of, at the time, I looked at it as a therapeutic technique of taking people back to the worst experiences that they've had in their lives. Sometimes traumatic, sometimes just like very, very disappointing ones. And I both used it in my Congruent Man seminars. I've used it with poker players, entrepreneurs, so on and so forth. And basically the gist of it is that you go back and you extract life lessons, or sometimes business lessons or love lessons, what have you, from those things, while simultaneously releasing the negative emotions to it. And I've done that with amazing therapeutic results for years and years. And I've always done it once, sometimes twice. And then I got the idea that, wait a minute, if I did that on several different experiences, then wouldn't that be collecting checklist points? And then I did my own. I then called it a success checklist, and I collected a bunch of different checklist points, life lesson points from different parts of my life. I also expanded it into imagining I was into the future where things have gone really well, and what could I learn from that? And also going into a future where everything went wrong, and what can I learn from that? And a bunch of different things, and I came up with this 12-point checklist of my own life that just felt amazing to look at. And one of the points was that this was my own, and going through this process made it really special versus using Tim Ferriss, Scott McKay's, Tony Robbins' checklist. I mean, that's going to look nice on the wall. But when it's your own experiences that you've been through and extracted the life lessons that you can, and also getting closure on it, it really made a big difference.
So, it comes down to this, and this is what it sounds like you're talking about to me. We all live our lives, and as we live our lives, we experience things, and yes, we all make mistakes. So what you're doing is you're extracting the wisdom from those experiences, and yes, those mistakes, and also the healing that may come from that in the form of, basically putting it all down on paper and formulating the thoughts and taking what you can from them to make a better future for yourself. Correct?
Yes. And it's interesting because then what happened, it was only a couple of weeks after the last time we talked, is that I had in Denmark, where I'm from, I've been watching the show called X Factor that Simon Cowell started, and it's sort of like American Idol, where people go on and sing sometimes their own songs, sometimes cover versions, blah, blah, blah. And I always thought, someday it would be fun to audition for that, because I am a songwriter and I love to sing. And as we all know, there's 7 days in the week, and someday is not one of them. So it never really happened. And then I got rid of that excuse. And once I did that, then it became a question of making a decision. Because before that, it wasn't really a decision to be made. It was just an excuse that was there all the time. And then I started to think back and forth, should I do it? It's going to be a lot of time back and forth. And then after 2 weeks, I went, wait a minute, Michael, you're the guy who came up with the success checklist. Why don't you make the decision through the success checklist? And then as I looked at and tapped into my checklist, within a minute, I realized that it was not a decision to be made. It was a knowing that I had to do it. And that's when it really hit me how powerful it was, that it, instead of having to make a decision, it helped me tap into an inner knowing of what I needed to do. And it was instant / took a minute. And that's when I realized, you know what, this needs to be my focus.
You know what this reminds me of in a way is, for years, Michael, I've been telling guys to make a list of the traits they're looking for in the woman of their dreams. And the beauty of that is it not only focuses guys on who it is they're looking for, it also focuses them back reflectively onto themselves. Who the hell am I? What am I about? What is my purpose? What are my values? And who is the woman who's going to match up with that? I mean, sure. Items on that checklist, if you're going to call it that.
Because if you're a leader, you want to go first. Like I use the example of a mirror. If you're standing in front of the mirror and you're waiting for the reflection to smile back before you do it, it's going to take a long time. So I love what you're doing, because it's exactly an opportunity for guys to embrace those qualities themselves first.
Well, you're right. It is masculine to lead. but it is also an extremely good idea at the more pragmatic level to know who you are before you decide who you want. And the beauty of it that is also seen in what you're talking about, I'm noticing here, is that you've got to be true to yourself. You know, you have this list you've just put together of what you said you wanted. And, you know, I have guys rank the traits that they are looking for from 1 to 10, and then I have them build a secondary list of what's called deal breakers. You know, it's not a term I came up with, obviously, but they're more binary. Like, you know, if she's addicted to crack, she's not going to be my future wife, right? Things like that. She's clinically psychotic. I don't want her in my life, and so on. And what that does is pretty much anchors what you want at the cognitive level, at a logical level, so that when we meet a woman and she just does it for us, we have already told ourselves months or possibly even years ago, hey, wait a minute, this is who you said you wanted. And this is who you said you absolutely weren't going to tolerate in your life. So if we find ourselves making excuses after the fact, when we meet a woman who we find really sexy and at an emotional level we just want, when she's no darn good for us, we've already told ourselves that, right? And now we have to live with that and be true to ourselves. And my goodness, you know, if the list has become outdated and, you know, I was only kidding myself, or perhaps I didn't include this element that I should have, you put it in there and you evolve the list. But in the moment, that ability to look back and say, hey, you know what? I told myself this. And now I'm trying to make excuses literally for myself. And just those words rolling off my tongue, Michael, make no sense, right? So, you know, in the moment when you have this list that you formulated, that you put together as a real, actual, fungible project, then later on, it's a feather in your cap because it keeps you grounded. It keeps that wisdom at the forefront of your life. So, well, frankly, you're less likely to make mistakes in your career, in your personal life, and certainly in your love life, right? Am I onto something?
Yeah. And what I also love about what you just mentioned is that I bet that the right woman will feel that once the man recognizes that she fits into it, because that's gonna make him project something, and the right one's gonna feel that, oh, there's something here. She might not be able to put it into words, but it's also like the one of the old like tactics in the pickup community they call qualifications, which unfortunately works if you do it insincerely of qualifying a woman. Also, you know, I had to set up certain criteria for her to live up to. But what I've also said, which is why it's so cool to talk to you, because we think so much alike, is like once she feels that, oh, this is actually real, then it's that much better. And this is also one of the things I've told my guys in the Congruent Man program is having the courage to make the decision not to compromise on those qualities. Like if she doesn't live up to that list that you mentioned, it's nice to meet you, but sorry, it's not going to work out. And having that courage and demonstrate that leadership and non-willingness to compromise on who you truly are and what you truly want, that's very, very attractive as I see it. Yeah, because absolutely. It's the opposite of being needy. And I think I mentioned that the last time we talked, that was how I started the whole Congruent Man, is that I asked female friends of mine, what's the worst thing a guy can have? And they all said, well, if he's needy, because then it's not about them, then it's about his need. And then I thought, well, what's the opposite of being needy? Well, that's exactly what you demonstrated with that list. It's knowing what you want and not being willing to compromise on it.
Well, it's security. Yeah. What you just talked about is important to underscore, because women love to feel chosen. And indeed, you know, you were talking about pickup tactics. What I'm talking about here is an actual strategy, something more long-term.
Oh, yeah. I just meant that it's funny that the pickup guys, it works for them as a fake strategy. And so it works that much better with what we're talking about.
Yeah, you and I are on the same page. I'm affirming what you said, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this isn't something that you use in the moment on a whim as some sort of trick, right? This is something you've thought through. And yes, when you meet women and they find out that they fit the prototype, the blueprint, as it were, of who you're looking for, because it's rooted in who you are. Your identity has produced this desire for the right woman in your life, the woman feels safe and secure and chosen. And neediness isn't even in the conversation because, yeah, you want this woman in your life, but it's because she matches up so well with you, not because you're desperate for a warm body who can fog a mirror. And see, that's the thing. Women don't want to be a piece of meat. They don't want to be a temporary solution. They want to feel chosen because that, like I said, makes them feel secure. And that's what women are all about. And what I call God's dirty little trick, Michael, a big part of it is how sex works and how attraction works. Because in many ways, it's kind of arbitrary. It could have been any set of points, but the divine inspiration behind it has made it thus. And what happens is when you make a woman feel secure with your masculine presence, having a plan, having ambition, it literally makes them horny. It turns them on sexually. And as soon as we guys start figuring that out, we will have unlocked the secret of the universe in terms of how women are and, frankly, how we can understand them. And once that happens, all the women start loving you. So, absolutely. Having a checklist for finding
hallelujah.
Having the woman on paper before you find her sounds a little wonkish, okay? Like you're being a little too clinical or perhaps even sanitary about this. But see, the thing is, what comes first in the real world is you find a woman and you're hot for her. She does it for you. And that's when logic and things that make sense to you and your future and the positive nature of that future, as you've already alluded to, that we do have control over. I agree with you on that. You alluded to that and I agree with it. What happens is when you know who you're looking for, you tend to find her too. And you tend to weed out the ones who aren't right for you.
Yeah, it becomes effortless. Well,
yeah, I wouldn't call it effortless, but it becomes easier because you have more options, because it's sort of a domino effect, right? There's a cascade to it. Once you start finding women who are congruent, that's a term you like, I know. You talk about your branding as the congruent man, basically. When you find people who are congruent with you, you tend to be attracted to them. And when you know what you want and you're leading and you have this ambition and you're making women horny on top of that, voila, you have more options in life. And then when you have more options among women who are actually who you're looking for, here's the needy word again, you're less needy in general, and you definitely don't need women who aren't going to be right for you. I've had women who aren't right for me thank me for figuring this out. They're like, yeah, I'm disappointed, but at least now I'm freed up to go find someone, who will appreciate me more, as I used to like to say to them.
Yeah, and the other thing it also does, both with the checklist and the list that you described, you help men develop, is that when you follow that list as much as you possibly can, what I also realize is that it eliminates regret. Because if you make decisions from who you truly are, your bigger self, your higher self, and in this case, one of the things that most of us have experienced as men is that, yeah, there's been certain relationships, certain things that we regretted going into. And had we followed that list, we either wouldn't have got into it or we wouldn't have regretted it. So this was one of the other big insights I had. I think it was 2 days after I had finished my life golden checklist or success checklist, is I was thinking back like the last 10 years and trying to identify what has been the major quote unquote mistakes that I had made. And then it hit me. And I remember exactly where I walked when that thought hit me. Is like, whoa, if I had made those decisions about the people I let into my life and other things, if I had made those through my new checklist, I wouldn't have made a single of them. And then I realized, holy shit, if I move forward in my life, utilizing this checklist, that means that I can have no regrets, because things might happen that I don't prefer, but I truly can't have regrets because I made the decision from an inner knowing and from my biggest self, whatever you want to call it, higher self, higher minds, be my guest of picking a name. And so I think also in terms of what you described with that list that you help men create is that if you actually follow it and you make that decision of this is my list, like you can almost go Gollum-like and go, it's mine. Then there is no regret. It's not possible. Yeah, it might not go exactly like you wanted to, but there's no regret because you use something that was a representation of, like you said, the true you. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Well, the beauty of the list like that is it is uniquely, truly yours. if done right and done purely of your own volition, I mean, I'm sure other people are going to influence you a bit in life. I mean, you get good advice here and there, you get bad advice and you throw it out. But, notwithstanding any of that, what you have is something that's uniquely yours. There's not going to be another golden checklist anywhere in the universe like yours. And to be sure, I'm really fascinated about this concept. It's not really what I was expecting. I was thinking maybe it would be something sort of set in stone, like maybe a Jordan Peterson 12 rules for life thing that you'd come up with to bestow upon us.
That's great too. Absolutely. And I love Jordan.
Yeah, 100%. It's different. It's different though. What you're talking about kind of reminds me of a hybrid between a bucket list, things that I would love to do, have, or experience, et cetera, before I, pop my mortal coil, and what Stephen Covey of 7 Habits fame used to call a list of unifying principles. And famously, he would have a list, and suggest we do the same, of basically stuff we believe, principles we follow, values we hold, and they would all be first person and they would all be present tense. So these wouldn't be things you aspire to. These would be things you claim in the moment. I am a man who does this. I am a man who believes this. I'm a man who treats women with respect. I'm a man who walks with his head held high every day. And perhaps, more practical ideas as well. I'm a man who eats his broccoli. I'm a man who doesn't eat any meat, whatever it is. Those would go on this list of unifying principles, and you'd review them rather frequently to make sure you were, once again, here's that word, congruent with who you want to be, that your values, your morals, your ethics all add up. And according to Stephen Covey, this makes you a better person. It makes you a better man because you put on paper those things you believe and you're not being blown and tossed, certainly with the wind, and also you're damn skippy not being blown and tossed by the opinions of someone else.
Yeah, by the way, I'm not claiming that when I help people create their own, unique success checklist, that's the only checklist in their life at all. Because like some of the things you said in terms of health and other things, that could be other checklists that are super valuable in a specific context. And for example, I started expanding it into helping people create their own business success checklist. So we went through their biggest mistakes in business, their biggest successes, what could I learn from that, and so on and so forth. And same thing in terms of relationships and life and love, is that's a different checklist for me than it is like the sort of the biggest one, which is in this case the success checklist. So you can have all kinds of different ones. And that's also what's so fascinating about the concept. Yeah, so there's this book called Checklist Manifesto that outlines in so many different ways where checklists, even very, very simple ones, have literally saved lives, like in terms of operating procedures, like for pilots. And where when you read those checklists, you and me would recognize most of the things. But the fact that it was there, it was simple, literally can, in this case, save lives or save money, save your sanity. In your case, with the checklist of qualities in women,
so save it's lawyer fees in the family court system.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So definitely, it's not about only having one checklist. It's about having it in different contexts that is important in your life, and then I happen to believe and have the experience that having the overall one for success and life is a very good one for like the biggest decisions, and then tapping into the knowingness versus decisions.
Well, I'm just glad you were talking about Warren Buffett, because everybody seems to be talking about Elon Musk lately. And I tell you what, me and my cryptocurrency portfolio are sick of talking about Elon Musk. So I'm glad you went in the other direction.
Yeah, I'd listen to Warren Buffett all day versus Elon. I have nothing against him as such, but, he's not there yet in many ways, as I see it, at least.
So talk to me about some of the practical ways having put together this checklist has changed your life, and also why some guys might benefit immediately instead of in such a far-flung, long-term sense from doing it for themselves.
Yeah, so one of the biggest insights I had also in the last year in terms of what a checklist can be used for is one of the other things I've taught a lot is speed of implementation, the power of having a shorter time frame between making a decision or having an idea until you take the first action step. And that's been demonstrated as the number one trait with successful people. And so the biggest challenge is typically when people hear about it, and if they recognize, I need to test this, is that they make the first steps too complicated, or something that they can do tomorrow, or even worse, next week. Where what I discovered is that if you have a checklist, and it doesn't have to be, life's golden checklist, success checklist, whatever, it could be any type of checklist. If you make the checklist the first step in terms of speed of implementation, that's really fantastic, because you can have whatever checklist we're talking about. You can have that on a 3x5 card. You could have it on your iPhone or Samsung, whatever, or you can have it memorized. So having a checklist as the first step of checking in with the idea, with the decision, whatever the context is, whether it's business, life, relationships, that is super, super valuable, because you can do it pretty much instantly, like literally within 10 seconds. And then you've taken the first action step. And quite often it will tap into a knowing that, oh, yeah, I definitely need to go forward with this. And then, well, if I knew what the second step now could be, what would it be? Or you will tap into, oh, no, this is probably not a good thing. I might put this into my, let's think about this later folder or whatever. So that's definitely been an epiphany for me in terms of utilizing the checklist always as the first step after getting an idea or making a decision to test something or go in a specific direction.
Yeah, I really like that, because like you, I believe in a series of small goals leading to a larger one. And I've talked about that a lot on this show. And one of the things I was thinking about in terms of perhaps one of the, minor pitfalls of putting together such a checklist as you're talking about is you can put too many things on it. And then you end up being like a dog chasing its tail, and there are too many shiny objects and you just don't know what to go for next. And so when confronted with so many self-imposed choices, you end up doing none of them. Whereas if you keep it to maybe a top 10 list, or here are the things that are prioritized right now, or even putting the items on the checklist into tiers like you just talked about, I think that sounds like, a much more workable plan for a lot of guys. So that way you do have some things on paper. And by the way, I don't know about just simply memorizing it. I would write it down, because there's something about writing things down that's like making a stone tablet.
Yeah. I mean, I tattooed on my eyelids or I actually considered my first tattoo being my checklist, but it's going to be too big. So I have it in my pocket and in my phone and in my mind.
And what if it changes? I mean, it's like, crossing out the names of your girlfriends on your arm and getting a new tattoo every time,
I just added one like a couple of weeks ago, which was the power of thinking big. That wasn't on my first one, and I realized, this is time for it to be part of it.
You added a new tattoo, or you added a new item on your list?
Yeah, a new item on my list.
Okay.
And exactly like you said. So what I do in the process is that I help people come up with 20 plus different potential checklist points. And then we do a comparison and get it down into 10 or 12 typically. So just like you said, it's more manageable. And also you can remember them, and it doesn't mean that you forget about the other ones, but you want to have that workable checklist. And in general, a checklist is better off being simple rather than too long or too complicated, just as an overall thing.
Well, I tell you what, I think this idea is absolutely fantastic, and I'm glad we shared it with these guys today, because I think all of us should implement something like this if we haven't already. And I love the fact that it combines those elements of our personal principles and those, ideas and accomplishments that we aspire to. And you've done a lot of good thinking on this, and what a valuable episode for these guys. This is fantastic.
Yeah, thanks. And let me add the one last thing that really made me floored in terms of the power of this is me being a big fan of Warren Buffett, and him releasing his public checklist. Is that what I looked at is reading biographies and different material about him. Is that I went back and this is going to sound a little self-serving, and that's all right. Take it for what it is. But when I looked at his history and I looked at my method of coming up with a checklist, because the big challenge that some people mention is that, well, how can you have a success checklist if you haven't had success yet? And that's a very good question. So that's part of what this does, is because what has happened throughout history basically is that the people who became successful became it because they realized what they could learn from their failures. Like most people who are millionaires have been broke, and then they managed to extract lessons from that and apply it in the things that made them successful. So what I realized when looking at Warren Buffett's history is that, and I know it's going to sound a little egoistic or whatever, is that if he had gone through this process, he could potentially have come up with the same success checklist 15, 20 years earlier, because he had the experiences where he could have extracted it. And when I realized that, I went, okay, this needs to be my primary focus in life, getting this out there, because it's so hands-on, it's so easy, and once you have the tool, it's almost hard to forget not to use it, because it's so easy, it's so simple.
Well, it doesn't sound egotistical to me. It sounds purely pragmatic. And indeed, putting a checklist together of things you aspire to, it sounds almost silly to think that you will have to have reached it already before you make a checklist about it. I mean, we're not reporting here, you're aspiring here. So we look to mentors, people whose success we respect. We draw from that and we put a list together of things we need to do, a veritable to-do list to get from point A to point B. I mean, that's only natural. I mean, that's self-improvement. I love it. I think it's great. And you know what, Michael, when we send guys to mountaintoppodcast.com/checklist, right? Yeah. What they're going to find is some information about you and also about how they can build their own checklist, correct? We'll have that website set up for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And they're also going to be, I'm actually linking to the last podcast we did and also this new one and a presentation I did on the same conference we were speaking at. So there's going to be a lot of stuff that the guys can listen to and download and watch. And also information about the checklist.
Fantastic. You just can't beat that. Well, Michael Lassen, thank you so much for joining us again today. Just like last time, it's been a fantastic show that I know these guys are going to enjoy immensely.
Yeah, and just the very last thing to add is even if you want to make a 5-minute checklist, is look at the three, or let's say the two worst relationships you've been in and the best one, and think about what's the 3 lessons I could learn from each, negatively and positively. Write all those 9 down, and the next time you go on a date or make decisions, if anything, that's going to be a value of looking at that as you make a decision.
Yeah, that's a good word also. Very, very good. Gentlemen, if you have not visited mountaintoppodcast.com lately, please go there. Check out our sponsors, Origin in Maine and herosoap.com. Both of those supporters of our show develop products that I use personally on a daily basis. The supplements, the jeans, the boots at Origin in Maine, and the soap and the body wash from Hero Soap Company are among the best that I've ever used in my entire life, and I say that with absolute certainty. Please check out Hero Soap Company and Origin in Maine by clicking on the links that we have at mountaintoppodcast.com. And gentlemen, if you have not yet talked to me for free for 25 minutes yet about where you are right now and where you want to be in your life, it's time to go ahead and do that. The year 2021 is already about half over. Man, remember how long 2020 seemed with COVID and lockdowns and everything? And this year's just flying by. Guys, to get from where you are right now to where you want to be, the very first step is to talk to me. You can sign up in real time on my calendar electronically by clicking on the red button in the upper right-hand corner at mountaintoppodcast.com. We'll talk about where you are right now, where you want to be, the relationships you have going on in your life, and how you can go from point A to point B for sure. One of the things you heard Michael talk about is speed of implementation. Well, gentlemen, the time to procrastinate is now behind you, and the time to move forward is upon you. So let's do this thing. It's all there for you at mountaintoppodcast.com. And until I talk to you again real soon, this is Scott McKay from X&Y Communications in San Antonio, Texas. Be good out there.
The Mountaintop Podcast is produced by X&Y Communications. All rights reserved worldwide. Be sure to visit www.mountaintoppodcast.com for show notes. And while you're there, sign up for the free X&Y Communications newsletter for men. This is Ed Roy Odom speaking for the Mountaintop Podcast.